Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome to episode 264 of the show. And finally, we're getting a chance to get to this episode. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe everything I've gone through putting this episode together, but we'll save that here for here in just a minute. Meanwhile, you're getting ready to hear a follow-up interview. Today's guest, Kevin Carr, is no stranger to the show. He was with us back in 2018 on episode 40, and this is a great conversation, getting to catch up with Kevin over the past 6 years, what's been going on, hearing about the end of his syndicated radio show, Fat Guys at the Movies. We have such a great chat. It actually went a little longer than I've been doing lately, just because we have such a good time. And you're going to really enjoy this. Along the way, we're going to be discussing the value of short stories, prioritizing your time, and doing audible stories yourself, as well as a couple of his other stories that we touch on, what they're about, and so on. It's lots of great stuff, and all of that's coming up here in just a moment. So stay tuned. So yeah, meanwhile, this has been interesting. I had actually recorded this episode Labor Day and was getting it all set. Well, life gets in the way, things happen, and in this case, it was a matter of a medical emergency where my youngest daughter ended up with appendicitis, and she had to go into surgery, get it removed, and was taking care of the grandkids, and it's just been kind of a whirlwind past 48 hours. Yeah, I went back to work on this episode early the next morning, and audio, something was wrong. And I guess what I can say is, just like many things in life, don't try to rush through, right? Because I did something wrong with the audio, and so I'm recording this a second time, and it's late on Tuesday the 3rd when this would normally come out. So yeah, this episode's coming out Wednesday morning, a little bit late, but better late than never, because it's a great episode. You're gonna love it. My daughter is fine, by the way. I guess I didn't specify that, but yeah, she's doing great. She's already home and gonna be resting for the week. Anyway, yeah, I won't take up too much more of your time. I just wanted to kind of explain what was going on, why this episode did not drop yesterday, but you're in for a treat with this follow-up interview with our guest, Kevin Carr. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back. Hey, speaking of welcome back, I have a big one for you this week. Somebody from episode 40, back in October of 2018, first year of the show, and someone who's become a good friend of the show. I am talking about Kevin Carr. Now, you may know Kevin from Fat Guys at the Movies, his podcast and radio show that's been on for years and years. Fantastic show, one of my favorite movie review shows, and just recently came to an end, or did it? We're going to find out all of that coming up here in just a moment. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome back to the show, Kevin Carr. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, good to be back. Always good to reconnect with you. It's a pleasure to be back on, to be returning to the Sample Chapter.
Yeah. A little bit of almost 6 years to the month since you were last on here. Man, that's crazy.
And nothing has happened at all in the world over the last 6 months. Nothing.
Yeah, it's just been a blink of an eye. All of a sudden, wow, hey, man, nothing's happened at all.
Yeah, there's been no problems. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, last time you were on, we were discussing, I just lost it. We were discussing the Ghost Readers and other stories. That was a fun book. And I can't remember if at the same time I read Gobble, your Thanksgiving novelette, which was hilarious, like hilariously scary, but still it was just awesome. And I know since then you've had a few more books, 13 Turns, Organ Grinder, Not the End. But I've been a longtime follower of Fat Guys at the Movies as well. So I get to catch up with you through that and hear everything you've been up to. But give the audience a little bit of what has this year been like in the life of Kevin Carr?
Well, this has been a year of transition for sure because, like you said, I have shuttered the Fat Guys at the Movies radio program, which was on over 100 stations nationwide, syndicated, and it was on podcast form. And I love doing the show. And for the last 2 decades plus, I've been doing movie reviews, and I love doing movie reviews. I still do them for Westwood One Radio on America in the Morning. So if you have that in your market and you listen to that earlier than I'm ever awake, uh, you can you can hear me review movies and do entertainment reports throughout the week. But the weekly show, as much as I love doing it, what had happened was I at New Year's, every New Year's, I like a lot of people do. I don't even make resolutions as much as a list of projects I want to do, and so I made that list of projects in 2024 or New Year's Day, and I look at it, and then I look at my list from 2023, and it's virtually the same list. I mean, it's almost identical to these projects that I have in motion that I want to complete. And I said, wow, as much as I love doing the show, I think I've taken the Fat Guys at the Movie radio show as far as it can go and retain what makes it Fat Guys at the Movies. And at this point, I was spending 18 to 25 hours a week watching stuff and content for the show, which I
Mm.
loved doing, but that's a huge drag on my time. And so I said, I have to change something. And that was what was pulling most of my resources. And I have all these writing projects and other projects that I wanted to tackle. And so I said, okay, let's refocus that. And so that's one of the things I did. And I said farewell to the show, as sad as that was, but that's opened up my time to develop more of my writing. I have the writing out there. I have the books published, but when it comes to publishing, especially if you're doing direct to consumer publishing, like you can through Amazon, it's a numbers game. You got to have keep churning out content, and if you
Right.
have new content on a consistent basis, that's when you find your loyal listeners or readers, whether you're doing radio or whether you're doing books, and that's where you can build. And I wasn't generating it fast enough and generating it consistently enough, and now I'm doing that, and so now I've focused on doing writing projects and wrapping up some of I've got an anthology coming out at the beginning of the or in September. I've got an audiobook of my most recent novel, a horror novel called The Organ Grinder, which will be coming out in October. And I started a Substack, which you can go to silvergecko at substack.com. And that has new content every week and some free stuff. And then it links out to with samples of a lot of my other stories and books and audiobooks that'll link out to where you can get the full, the full book or the full collection. And that comes out on a weekly basis. So I'm focusing a lot on developing my library of work.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm fascinated because I've been in similar positions from time to
Mhm.
time where it's kind of that look in the mirror moment of,
Yeah.
okay, am I doing what I really want to do? And the things that I'm doing now, are they really progressing me towards the goals that I have personally?
Mhm.
And like 8 years ago, it was that moment where I'm like, okay, I'm getting up every morning and I'm watching recorded shows or movies, or I'm playing video games when I could be writing. And I
Yeah.
decided I want to write. I've always wanted to write. Made that choice. We were talking before we came on the show a few years back. I decided, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of that time from my writing time and add that into physical fitness and get myself back into health again. And
Mhm.
that's been huge. And it's just kind of, and then with this show a year ago, I changed the format to free up some of my time. And I wasn't ready. I'm not ready at all, really, to end the show. I'd like
Oh,
to
sure.
keep it going. And I know a lot of my listeners are following because they enjoy, like, this is, I don't do a newsletter. So this is my newsletter. where
Yeah.
people can follow along and they're hearing about new authors and new stories, but they're also hearing from me and how I'm doing and what I've got going on. And it's just kind of a like, yeah, let me just kind of every once in a while prioritize my time, set things up to what do I need to do and what do I need to change to
Yeah.
put the focus in the right place. And that's I mean it's sad because Fat Guys in the Movies has been a my Friday show for years and
I,
years before I even got into podcasting, before I ever considered it. But it's still fun to catch, your short snippets every week yet of this movie or that movie. Twisters, I think was the last one I heard, um,
nah.
and to hear all that. So that's cool to hear you still on the air doing that.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, you mentioned it as that sort of that man in the mirror moment. Um, and here's the thing. I guess this is sort of like this is the balm to the sore of having to the wounds that you do when you leave another project. If you're working on something like with me with the radio show, like I said, I had taken it about as far as I thought it would go, just the way the business of radio is, and
Sure.
the way podcasting is, that there's ways to propel it forward, but then you have to carve into what makes that show unique. And it's okay to not abandon something, but to say goodbye to it, because that's not defining your life 100%. It's okay to move on to a new project. It's okay to move on to something else, especially if you've cultivated that, uh, that as long as long as you have. It's like making a nice meal. You make a big turkey dinner. At some point you're going to eat it, and at some point you're going to move on to something else later. And I think that's sometimes people are just afraid to make that step. And people make transitions. I find myself, that's one of my themes in the book Organ Grinder. It's every 7 years. I read somewhere a fact, I don't know if it's real, it's probably not, but that every 7 years the human body replaces all of its cells. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I read it in, I think Stephen King mentioned it in his uh, book Skeleton Crew. I think that's in the introduction somewhere. And that's, it's okay to reinvent yourself and reinvent what you do. And musicians do it. I was just listening to Paul Simon the other night, and he went through different versions of his music, and he changed, every so many years, and that's how you stay fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I agree, and that's fascinating to hear. I know what I do periodically to make sure that I'm doing the things that I want to do, but it's fascinating to hear the other people are also, doing that and having that look in the mirror moment of, all right, it's time to move on, or it's time for something new. And yeah, I find that fascinating. So, and it's exciting for me to hear that you're taking your creative endeavors into writing again, and
Yeah.
with new books and your Substack. So how's the Substack working out for you? And tell for those who aren't familiar, what is this Substack?
Substack is basically, it's a publishing platform. It's something like WordPress, only a little more organized. Whereas WordPress, you can kind of just do whatever you want. But Substack, it essentially is a newsletter and a website. So you have these newsletters that go out, and it also becomes a post on the site. So you can go to that post and read all the previous ones, and it's designed in a way that you can monetize it or not. Right now, my stuff's free. My Substack's free. Um, and what it is it's an empowering tool for writers. And I know a lot of writers, in, like, even just because I know a lot of film critics, because that's what I've done. I've known a lot of film critics who are moving into getting a Substack. People use it for everything from politics to cooking. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
it's anything you want, and people can sign up for the newsletter, and you get the posts essentially sent to you, and you can build the post into whatever you want with text or imagery or music or sound or whatever. And so what I set mine up in such a way that you get two newsletters a week. On Monday morning, you get three things for free. You get you get my movie review from that weekend, and so you can watch it. So if you don't follow me on TikTok, um, You get what I call a 99 shot, which is a short story. It's 99 words or less, and
Oh.
I love really short stories. I think it's an incredible tool. It's an incredible format to hone your ability to get to the point. You got 99 words to do it, and that's a very lean story. But it's a whole story. It tells a tale of some sort. Some of them are little gotcha things and everything, and they can be from. I try and keep them somewhat genre related: horror, sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
mystery, suspense. So you get a new one every week of that, and then you get a cartoon. I've stepped into cartooning. My son he can do art better than I can, and so we've developed these 4 panel cartoons called the Blockheads, and it's basically just a joke, a gag, something you would get in the back in the day when you'd read the paper and you go to the cartoon section. Do they even have that now? I mean, uh, but and so you get those 3 things, brand new one every week, and so that's on Monday, and it's a great way to kind of just quickly, you know, decompress before you have to do your job. Check your email, read that, and go, oh, have a couple minutes of levity or interest, and then you got to go do whatever your work week is. And then on Thursdays, I send out an excerpt, either a novel excerpt or story excerpt, sometime a full story, if they're short enough, and then it'll link out to what, or sometimes an audiobook. But that's just a way to you can kind of keep up, and they always have updates that tell you what's coming up next, what I'm working on, where to go, and it's kind of like working as a hub for my future projects.
Yeah. And that's great. I like the idea of the short stories, just the quick snippets, something that's quickly digestible, and
Yeah,
to keep people involved, to keep your name in there. They're, oh, hey, oh, let me read this real fast. Ah, good, there we go. Or the cartoon, and then move about, and but that sticks in the back of your mind,
yeah,
as a reader, as a person who's ingesting that and reading it, because then later on, after a while, they're like, hey, I need my new Kevin Carr fix for the week,
yeah.
and it's a good way to keep it going. That's a lot of fun.
And it's designed so, like, I remember when I worked in an office, you check your email you get your coffee and your bagel or whatever, and you sit down at your desk, and then you check your email, or you could be laying in bed doing it, and it just kind of distracts you before you have to be like, Captain Picard on the Enterprise and go, okay, damage report, what's coming up this week? you know?
That's awesome. So, in the background, I know in the last few years, you've still come out with a few other books, 13 more turns. You had 13 turns and then 13 more turns, not even a mouse. I remember you talking about that. That's another one that's like on my to be read file. One I was not aware of that it really caught my eye right away, and I'm going to have to download this. So it's on Kindle Unlimited. Your movie Truth, Real Answers to Real Questions. As a movie buff
Yeah.
myself, I need to hear about that.
Yeah, Movie Truth, it started out as a column, or was a column on Film School Rejects. If you, I don't know if you're familiar with the site, but I wrote there for years,
Hmm.
and it was a column that I came up with with one of the editors as basically I would take a question of this happened in a movie. Would it really happen? For example, one of my favorite ones is The Thing. One of my favorite movies, John Carpenter's The Thing,
Mm-hmm.
is if the thing actually got loose, would we ever even be able to contain it? And
Oh, wow.
I go through the science of it, and I said, well, this is how they say it works in the movie, and this is what happens, and the answer. And then we come to a conclusion, and I do research and I talk to people. I did one on how long would a zombie apocalypse last? If the zombie outbreak actually happened and took over the world, would it actually end, or would it go on in perpetuity? And I talked to people from body farms, about how long it takes a body to decompose, and what happens when a body decomposes, and what pieces fall off, and that sort of thing. And the answer was like 18 months. So
Oh.
if because the zombies would eventually rot and fall apart, and that's the whole point. Um, and I did one where I said how much would the trip in planes, trains, and automobiles actually cost in today's dollars. So I figured out how long, the plane tickets and that sort of thing, and would it be cheaper to just take a taxi cab from New York to Chicago? I did another one on uh, could you make the beer run that they did in Smokey and the Bandit in real. I did not try that myself. I did not get a semi truck full of Coors and get the equivalent of Sally Fields to drive with me, but figured out how long that stuff takes. And that's basically what Movie Truth was. And we published the articles, and it was a popular column, and then it kind of finally it had its day and it ended up disappearing. And I just took those and I collected them, updated some of them, for because it had been several years since I did it, and he published it. So that's a fun book. There was a book, and I forget the author. I think it's called What If, and the audiobook is read by Will Wheaton, because I listened to it on Libby. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Libby. It's
Yeah,
an
I've heard of that.
audiobook thing. You basically connect it to your local library. You use your library card, and it has audiobooks that you can just download and listen to for the library. So you're not,
Yeah.
it's because it's a lot more economical than like going through an Audible subscription. And if you don't have enough time to listen to Audible books at the rate you can buy them through your subscription, it's a more economical way to do it. But Libby's great. It's app on the smartphone. And so I listened to this book called What If, that Will Wheaton narrated, and it was the same type of thing where it was a guy, he took, like, one of his things he did is what would happen if you had a mole of moles, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd of moles, the animal. And he talks about it basically making a mole planet, and it would have its own gravitational field. And that's a fun book. So that one's very similar to what I did. And that's what Movie Truth is. The cover of Movie Truth is done by my son, who does the Blockhead stuff. So he did some little illustrations throughout it. So it's a fun book. It covers a lot of things. A lot of I had to really churn the creative juices on that one.
It looks like it. It looks like a lot of fun. So yeah, I can't wait to check that one out. Meanwhile, you've been writing Cosmic Tales, your new anthology that actually, by the time this episode drops, it will have just come out September 1st. So tell us about Cosmic Tales.
Yeah, Cosmic Tales it's an anthology of science fiction I've written over the years. Some of them are new stories, some of them are older ones. I did some publishing in the 90s. I back when magazines existed, you could actually sell stuff and they put it in print and send you a check. So I have a couple of those stories that are in there. It's very similar to the Ghost Readers, where it's a collection of my stories. 13 turns and 13 more turns collected my horror stories, and Ghost Readers and Cosmic Tales collect my science fiction things that fall more in the science fiction realm. So yeah, it's a dozen or so stories about just varying things. Some of them very cosmic. Some of the stuff like is sort of space opera type things. I have a couple sort of, I grew up as a Star Wars fan, and so I'm playing with my own little gee whiz zap laser type stories. I have some that contemplate bigger things. I have some that are, maybe have a little bit of a Kurt Vonnegut bent to them, where I'm setting the stage for, greater stories about the cosmic nature of the universe. But yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a collection of short stories of varying length. Some of them are very, very short, which, I've talked about the short stories, and some of them, there's a couple of them. I had the plan back in the 90s. I figured write really like short, like 1,000-word stories. And back then paper was expensive, ink and publishing was expensive, and space was a luxury. I mean, now it's you can print as many pages as you want online, because there is no physical, the size of the file is sort of irrelevant when it comes to text. But back in the day, you could only get so many inches for a story. And so I said, well, maybe it'll be easier to sell one if it's short. And that happened. A couple of them I sold, and I could treat myself to McDonald's with the massive paycheck I got for those. But so they have some really short ones. Some of the gotcha stories. It's more kind of fun stuff. I do kind of get into a little more, meaningful subtext in some of the stories, but some of them are just there to have a good time and it just sort of disconnect from like all the other crap that's going on in the world today. And you can read a story about intelligent dogs.
Yeah, that's awesome though. And yeah, I mean, I've come to really enjoy the value of a short story. I never really saw myself doing that until I got invited to enter one in an anthology 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
I thought, well, why not? I'll try it out. They told me here's the storyline, or what it needs to contain, something
Yeah,
along these lines, but the rest of it's up to me. Like,
yeah,
okay, all right, well, I'll see what I can come up with, and I had a blast. It was a nice, what do you call that? Where it just kind of cleans the plate, cleans the
oh
palate.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and when I was done with that, I was like ready to go get back into my sci-fi series that I'm writing, and just dove back into it and felt good. And then I finished the second book on that series, and then I got invited to do another short story for a new anthology that's coming out in November. And so I was
Mm,
working on that. And
good
when
for
I'm
you.
not editing that story, I'm back into book three of my series. And it's been such a nice palate cleanser is what I was trying to think of. And
Yeah, yeah.
just something completely different and a lot of fun. And I've got a little short story about Bigfoot that I've been kind of toying with writing, that I may
Nice.
just write and put it off to the side and wait and see if it maybe I can find for a home for it somewhere.
Well, and this is why I've always loved short stories as a reader and a writer. As a reader, the best thing about a short story is if you don't like it, you're going to be done with it soon, and you can
Yeah.
move on to the next one. So it's like we've all read books where we're sitting there and we're like a third of the way through, and you're like, I don't, should I finish it? And everyone's like, oh, you should finish it. And I'm just like, it's a real time commitment to if you're reading an 800-page book and it's a slag. Short stories you can get through pretty quickly, but also as a writer, it's very good exercise. Excuse me, it's very good exercise to in brevity. It
Yeah.
it it, it forces you to characterize quickly, to find because some people when they characterize they want to take pages and pages and pages, and that can be good, but also at a certain point you need to find a way to weave the actual story and the plot in, so you're not just talking about different people. And you're like, I thought this plot was about XYZ, and we haven't gotten to it yet, and we're 50 pages
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in.
I know
And
exactly what you're
a
saying.
short stories, you hone those skills to write not quickly. It's not about being the fastest, but it's about being efficient and to efficiently characterize somebody when they walk in a room sometimes.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
to use sorry to interrupt. I was going to say to use
No, go ahead.
a movie analogy. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, all you need to see is that opening sequence where Indiana Jones is testing things and then he walks into the light.
Yeah,
And you know everything you need to know about Indiana Jones.
exactly.
And I don't even think he says anything before he walks into the light.
Yeah, I don't think
That's
so.
that's the brevity of a short story. Or if you to take an actual line, and The Shining is a big book. Stephen King's The Shining is a big book. It's a great book,
Hmm. Yeah.
but the opening line is I forget the actual order of it, but do you know what the opening line of The Shining is?
I can't remember. I just read it like 3 years ago for the
I
first
think I
time.
I may have the structure shuffled a bit, but it's Jack Torrance thought a vicious little prick because he's talking to the guy he's doing his interview, and that's his first line. And
Hmm.
immediately you know that Jack Torrance doesn't have patience for people. You know he's easily annoyed, and you
Right.
know he's having to sort of kiss the ring of whoever his quote unquote boss is. and
Exactly.
that's in the first line. So yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I was just going to say my first book, I toiled with it for years and years, and all I was writing was like the first 3 to 5 chapters. And I finally, my writing group were the ones who finally gave me the direction of saying like, well, everything you're writing is backstory.
Yeah.
That I told them what the story was about, and they were the ones who saw, like, helped me see, like, I'm just writing backstory. I need to get into the actual meat of the story and begin there. And then once I realized that, I was like, oh yeah, like it was the story structure. It's like, oh, all right. And I think I used like 2 lines out of those first few chapters that went
Mm-hmm.
into the rest of the book. But it informed me later on. It helped me
Well,
out, so it
and
wasn't wasted.
what
But
you yeah, what you wrote, you wove in elsewhere. I'm sure you did flashbacks and developed
sure.
the characters, and you could sow those seeds through the action of the plot.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it and yeah, that's the thing. It forces you to characterize while you're telling the story, rather
Yeah.
than, like you said, just putting it all up front.
Right. Yeah. And then and doing these, I've written a few other books, but then doing these short stories has helped me really gravitate towards, let's get into the story faster because you don't have much time to tell that story.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's a great practice. And it's awesome that you're putting together the couple. You got several anthologies actually.
Yeah, I got 4 anthologies when with this one included, and then of course like the smaller ones, like you mentioned, Gobble and Not the End, and these my books in there, these short feeding grounds. These are novellas. They're like short, 10,000 word, 15,000 word stories. So they're sort of in that. That's the other thing about digital publishing that's so great, because back in the day, if you wrote something over 10,000 words, good luck publishing it anywhere.
Right.
If it was somewhere in that nether region between 10 and 5 and 50,000 words, it was that dreaded novella that, again, space was at a premium, and they didn't want to give that much space to some unknown writer. So it was very hard to get a novella published. But in a lot of ways, those things sometimes are a little easier to for people to download. They look at them, you charge less, and they can strike and get them, and it's a nice afternoon read.
Exactly. Yeah. So, in addition to Cosmic Tales, like I said, is available now for everybody listening to this episode, you've got audiobooks that are coming out, which you yourself are producing. So,
Yeah,
how's that been for you?
it took a bit of a learning curve. But first of all, I just want to say, I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of the do-it-yourself publishing model.
Hmm.
I, and because it's so different from when I started. When I started writing and publishing, that was in the 90s. It was a different world. The internet existed, but none of these tools were available. And there's so many hoops to go through to get to a publisher. And God bless the people who go through those hoops, but I'm in my 50s. And I don't have 10 years to find an agent, you know.
Yeah,
And I and whereas if you can put something together and deliver it directly to an audience, yeah, I'm not here to make $1 million. I wouldn't say no, but but you can develop a readership off of this. So Audible allows you through ACX, which is their uh, which is it's basically the audio version of KDP.
hmm,
It's you can put it yourself. Now they have pretty high standards when it comes to recording. You can't just record it on your iPhone and slap
right.
it up there. You have to make sure it's leveled and presented in a professional manner. Well, I'm being a radio professional. I'm like, I think I can manage that. And then you can read your own stuff or get somebody else to read it, and then publish it that way through Audible, and it shows up on Audible, and it becomes available to anybody who wants to buy it through Audible. And it's a great way to get your stuff out there. And since I have the audio expertise, I figured, I've been trained, at least hopefully sound interesting when I talk. I read the stuff myself. Um, and every now and then I write something. Like there's one of the stories, and I think it's 13 More Turns. There's an audiobook of that, and it has somebody has an Irish accent, and I'm just awful at it, but I just have to suffer through that. But don't write accents into your writing if you can't do the accent.
Oh my gosh.
I know I'm Irish, but you don't genetically get the accent. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah.
That's, but if you have the equipment and you have the expertise and the know-how, you can put together decent sounding things that can go out there. And I'll tell you, I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I've heard professionally made audiobooks that are not done well.
Yeah.
Through,
I have too.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So I think I do a decent job on them, and they take longer to do, and there's many more hoops to jump through. But I've got a couple in Audible. I've got, like I said, 13 More Turns. My anthology is on Audible. Feeding Grounds, which is a novella, is available on there, and the Christmas themed Not Even a Mouse, which is one of the zombie apocalypse novellas, that is available on Audible as well.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll have to check that one out. So that's awesome, man. I'm gonna have to go back in here because I knew you had more to offer than what I had read a few years ago. But yeah, it's nice to see your library building, and with more audio. I've been trending towards more audio recently, just because I'll listen to the books when I'm working out or even at work, because I can have it on in the background and be listening, or it's a bit of a pain if I'm really busy, because then I'm not paying attention. I'm like, oh crap, wait a minute, what was that? I missed something. Go back and so then maybe I'll have to turn it off and wait until I'm mowing the yard or something like that. But
and I take road trips all the time with my family. We drive from we're in Ohio, and we drive down to Florida, to do a cruise or stay in a hotel. And as I'm driving down there in the middle of the night, I love audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's so much easier now. You get the whole file; it's right there on your phone. It usually connects right into your the console of your car. I mean, the days of having to pull out the next tape or CD from books on tape.
Yes.
As much as I love books on tape, it was a bit of a pain in the butt.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Kevin, man, we could talk for hours, I think, but I need to wrap it up for now. We're going to have you back next week again, though, with one of those short stories out of Cosmic Tales. But meanwhile, where can people find and follow you, buddy?
Well, like I said, the best place to check out my writing is on my Substack, which is silvergecko.substack.com. And subscribe, send it to your friends, tell everybody about it. It costs nothing. So it's a great way to see some of my works. You can find me on TikTok. I have 2 TikTok accounts. If you go to Kevin M. Carr, that's my writing TikTok. So that's a great way. That you see the behind the scenes. You get to see how sausage is made. And then where you want to find my books, the easiest way is just go to fatguysatthemovies.com/books. It'll take you right to my Amazon page.
All right. Fantastic. So, and we'll have links to all that in the show notes, everyone, so that you know where to find and follow Kevin, and check out everything he has to offer. And I'll have all those links right there in the show notes. You can click on that. But also don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out next week when Kevin returns with one of his tales from Cosmic Tales, available right now. Until next week, everyone, take care.